Welcome to the Conservative Update. I'm the host, Eric Wen. Today we have the Joe Rees with us, and he is Toronto chair of the GTA Bridge Building team. And hello, Joe Rees. Hi. Can you tell our TV audience and about yourself?
Yes, well, I was born in British Guyana, but I grew up in England. I came to Canada in 1995 as an immigrant.
Okay, and can you tell our audience about the present situation of the Liberal government?
The Liberal government.
Right.
Well, I would say the Liberal government is in a desperate state right now.
Yes.
They are trying to cling to power without principle. They have no moral authority to govern this country.
Yeah.
Because we know that they are in a state of absolute scandal-ridden situation. So their position now is to cling to power at any cost, and finally they're trying to make a pact with the NDP, which may prop them up for another period of time. But we've seen in history, we've seen in other countries that these pacts do not last, because they are driven by self-interest, and they're never really with the best interests of the country in mind.
Then what is the reaction of the Conservative Party?
Well, you know, a great man once said, if you want peace, you have to prepare for war. And I think the situation now is we're preparing to do battle, because this country deserves it, and the citizens of this country demand it. I think we must be prepared to go to the country and give an alternative to this scandalous, this corrupt-ridden Liberal government.
Okay, and today we have the lunch with this our party leader, and he is addressing to the Indo-Canadian Chamber of Commerce, and I saw you there. Can you tell our audience about what our leader really say?
Well, I think the future Prime Minister's speech was split into three parts.
All right,
I think the first part talked about the scandals, because he had to do that, because he knows that it's got to be kept at the forefront.
Right.
We've got to be reminding people at every step that this is the reality of the situation we're living in right now.
Yeah.
And therefore he mentioned the scandals, which we expected him to do, and he did very well. The second part of his speech went on to talk about the values, and because he was talking to the
Indo-Canadians.
Yes, he talked there about their values, and because, you know, for a long time the Liberals had us believe that Liberal values were Canadian values.
Yeah.
And Canadian values were Liberal values.
Right.
But, you know, we have a situation here where we look at the Liberals when we find corruption, we find sleaze, we find scandal one after the other, we find mismanagement, and I'm sorry, but these are not our values. We have come to this country, many of us as immigrants, to work hard, to raise our families, and to live with the values that we inherited from our ancestors. And on that point, and these are in fact Canadian values, which are our values.
Right.
And these are conservative values. Hard work, you pay your taxes. It shouldn't be as high as they are today, and that's something else we need to address. But these are our values. And one of the values that I think that we, most of our immigrants bring to this country is, of course, the values of marriage that keep the fabric of our societies together.
Yes.
And he talked about that in terms of our position. And our position is very clear. We see human rights as something that is an entitlement of all human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And the gays and lesbians in our society are human beings, and they are entitled to all the rights. The rights to separate, the rights to inherit, the rights to make decisions when your loved one is on a deathbed, all the rights, even financial rights that are due to everyone else from the government. These are rights, and these are rights that they should sue for, and these are rights that they shouldn't have to sue for. These are rights that they should have.
Yeah.
But in Canadian law, you cannot sue for the right to a word. The word marriage, that's quite a separate issue. They can have all the rights, but the word you cannot sue for, and that is Canadian law. And that word marriage, I'm afraid that is sacred to thousands and thousands of people for thousands and thousands of years.
Yeah.
So as a compromise, our leaders talked about using the word civil union.
That's
Now,
right.
I feel that I
yes.
feel that if the court, and no court has ever been asked this, but if the courts and if the judges, unelected though they are, but if the judges were asked to decide on the constitutionality
Yeah.
of the civil union,
Mhm.
affording all the rights that go with that,
Yeah.
they would say it is constitutional. And that has never been asked of the courts yet. So that is our position, and he made that clear. And I think he found favor with a lot of the majority of the immigrants who were in that room today.
Yeah.
But of course, the thrust of the speech
Yeah.
was on immigration and immigration policy.
Yeah, I think that's what I heard. And from the headquarters, I aware they did mention we are ready for the elections, and they did mention about May 15th. All our 308 writings has to be ready, and the nominations meetings has to be finished. And can you tell us what the situation in the GTA right now?
Yes, of course.
Since you are the
Well,
Toronto chair.
Yeah. The point is we have to have nomination races in 209 ridings. The reason for that is that our 99 MPs are grandfathered, so they
Yeah.
do not have to seek nominations.
Yeah.
They are grandfathered. They are the candidates for the next election.
Right.
Now, in the other 209 ridings, or electoral districts as they're called today, we have to have nomination races. And basically, that has started happening over the last week. And by May 5th, in fact, May 16th,
16. Yeah.
by May 16th, 15th was put out there as a kind of a ballpark time.
Alright, yes.
But by the 16th, all 209 ridings will have had their nomination races. Now, as far as the GTA goes, there are about 20, perhaps 25, because they're growing by the day,
Yeah.
of our people who are seeking nominations in various
You're
ridings.
talking about ethnic
people,
groups.
yes.
Okay. And since that there are 24 elected MPs right here of
In
the
Ontario.
Conservative Party, right? Yeah. And what is the chances to be government for our party?
Well,
What you put there?
you know, I can't see any safe Liberal seat. Now, you
Is that
think
right?
you think I am on marijuana, but remember that's a Liberal policy. The point is, if you remember what happened to the Progressive Conservatives
Yes.
after Mulroney,
Right.
they went from majority to 2.
Yes.
Now, if I had sat here in 1995 and I had said to you, no Conservative seat is safe, you would have laughed at me the way I think you're kind of laughing at me now.
Right.
But I tell you this seriously, Eric.
Yeah.
I don't think there is one Liberal seat in Ontario that is safe. There's certainly no Liberal seat in Quebec that is safe. Those are all gone. And
Yeah.
we're working very hard to make sure that there's no Liberal seat left, not even Eglinton Lawrence, where
Is that
Mr.
right?
Volpe
Yeah.
thinks it is his God-given right to run that like his little fiefdom.
So there's no safety seat at all.
There's no safe seat. And Mr. Volpe could go out there and make his all of a sudden he has a new enlightenment when he's talking about all these immigration announcements he seems to be throwing out every day. It never occurred to him that these were the rights of people in the past. But I don't think that'll save him. I think there is no safe Liberal seat. And I hope too, when we come to it after June 27th or whenever, I hope 2 is a big number and they don't even have that many.
So obviously, this time there's a tie against Liberal, obviously, right?
It's a tsunami, my friend.
Tsunami.
It's a tsunami.
Is that
It's a
right?
tsunami. In the nicest way, it's a tsunami.
And I noticed you brought the book here. I think I realized this is what policy book.
This is our
Yeah.
policy book. As you know, Eric, we had our policy convention in Montreal
Right.
last month, and we now have our book, our blue book,
Yeah.
which will guide us in our platform in the coming election.
So that's what we the point. I mean the blue book before the elections. Okay, I know.
Well, out of this,
Yep.
our leader will come up with his platform. He's by no
Right.
means, as you know,
Right.
by no means straitjacketed only by what's in here.
Yeah.
He's certainly guided by this.
Right. And can you tell our audience about some immigration policies there?
Well, I know that immigration was the main thrust of what he discussed today, and it is the main thrust of what you want discussed tonight.
Right.
So
yes.
we've taken this time to get to this point.
Okay.
So what I'd like to do is to just run through for our viewers who may not have this document, may not have
Right.
heard of this before, to just run through what the Conservative Party stands for in terms of
Yeah.
immigration. And I will actually read to you the immigration principles as we agreed them in Montreal a month ago.
Written.
As it is written down here.
Yeah.
The Conservative Party supports a welcoming and well-managed immigration system for Canada based on a fair and transparent process that earns the respect and confidence of Canadians as well as of the international community. Now, right now it appears as though if you're a stripper, you have priority to get into. That seems to be their priority. The strippers can come in, but
That's happened.
and it continues to happen.
Right.
There is compassionate measures to assist in family reunification,
Yeah.
and I see because we had a protest outside Mr. Volpe's office,
Right.
that he has caved in on that, and all of a sudden it's his idea, and he's now talking about family reunification. Ensuring that Canada is successful in encouraging skilled immigrants to make Canada their destination of choice, and I will come back
Yeah.
to this at the end when we
All
talk
right.
about credentials.
Yes.
A clear and workable process for immigrants to obtain equivalency for their international skills, training and experience. And that is very important, that immigrants that have skills abroad
Right.
must first ascertain whether those skills are required in Canada.
Mhm.
If they can be used in Canada, they'll be recognized in Canada.
Right.
And if they're not, then what changes they need to make, or what amendments are necessary, or what
Mhm.
updates or refreshments are necessary in order to make them more relevant for Canada.
Yeah.
Addressing the need for adequate long-term funding for settlement service providers, and upholding Canada's humanitarian tradition of providing safe haven for refugees. Now, those are the main principles. It's
Yeah.
then broken down into settlement support.
I
Now, if
see,
you don't
yep.
mind, Eric, we could come back to this,
All right.
but I'd prefer to skim over settlement support. It's basically making sure that funds are available to aid in the settlement of refugees, of immigrants when they get to Canada.
Yeah.
And then there is refugee determination, the process by which we will ascertain that refugees are in fact refugees and they're not just trying to jump the lineup. Then there is a part on the application process, and again what we're saying is that the application process must work fairly, and people must be aware of what the application process is, and it must not be policy made on the hoof.
I think I remember I heard that the Harvard mentioned that they going to put more money into this money to reduce the process time, right?
Yes, indeed,
Yeah.
because he realizes that it is really unfair for people to be backed up for that period of time,
Yeah.
and by the time they come to Canada, perhaps the whole system has changed, the whole environment has changed.
Right.
So we've got to actually shorten the wait times.
Yeah.
Now, this is the part I want to spend more time on, and I know that this is what your viewers would like to talk about, which is the recognition of international credentials.
Yeah.
So let me just go through
Yeah.
this one by one again, and I could
Yeah.
explain them as we go through.
Right.
It says very clearly that the Conservative Party believes in providing new immigrants with the best possible opportunity to use their education and experience here in Canada. We see this as a matter of fairness to newcomers and their families, and a means of ensuring that Canada receives full benefit of immigration. A Conservative government will: 1. Work with the provinces to develop, in consultation with Canadian professional and trade associations, a process to evaluate standards in countries of origin in order to establish a workable system for assessing and recognizing credentials and experience. Now, that is very important.
Yeah.
There are 3 levels involved here. There
Yes.
is the federal government, which is where we are talking about here.
Right.
There's also the provincial government, and there is a provincial input, because immigrants settle in provinces. They don't just settle in Canada.
Right.
And of course, within the provinces, there are these associations the trade associations and and the
regulate their
professions,
own
which
profession.
regulates their bodies. So there's no point in the federal government opening the doors and the provincial governments letting them in, and then the professional bodies actually, out of self-interest and perhaps keeping their salaries at a certain rate, or out of ignorance or whatever, putting a spoke in the wheels. So we've got to make sure that the three entities work together. And this is why our policy is very clear. The three parts must work together, but not from when the immigrant arrives, but before. We've actually got to be proactive and go to the countries where these immigrants are and actually ascertain what their educational background is, what their needs are, etc.
So that means even for this one, actually the last 12 years, Liberal government, they didn't do that.
That was certainly not done. That was certainly not done.
But people say they're going to do it.
Oh, they're going to do it, of course. They will probably...
No, I mean the Liberal people say they
will be doing it.
But until I think only last
Well,
few
it's a
weeks
bit
they
like,
just say something.
it's a bit like child care, you know. Their child care programs, we heard about it in 93, in 95, in 97, in 2000. They talk about it.
Right.
They're very good in talking about things when an election is ready.
Harvard did mention that today.
Yes, but that is the Liberal, we know that.
Yeah.
So the second part is, once we've gone overseas and we've vetted what happens overseas,
Yes.
because we have to be aware of their standards overseas.
Yes.
And once that is done, the second part is to work with the provinces again, to develop in consultation with the Canadian professional and trade organizations again. So it's again the tripartite coming together of the three forces. You develop criteria for obtaining equivalent Canadian professional status and transition programs for integration of immigrants into the Canadian workplace. Now this is bringing the two things together. We understand what they do, we understand what we need, and we marry the two.
Yes.
Require the credentials process to be disclosed to applicants by immigration staff overseas and on the immigration and citizenship website that Canada has, so that there is knowledge, so that people understand exactly what is required and whether their credentials would actually fit into that scheme.
Yes.
Fourthly, to encourage international students graduating from accredited Canadian colleges and universities to remain and work in Canada. Now, this is something that the British government understood a long time ago. If you bring your students in and you train them in your country, and then and Britain did this too, you have them remain, then they will have your country at heart.
Yeah.
Even when they go back to their own country, they will, in that context, buy British.
Right.
And that was always understood. Don't ever believe that the British educated the colonies as an end in itself. It was because the colonies then understood that Britain was the main market.
Right.
And there was trade that developed then, because there was no fear, there was no ignorance. They understood the market. And we must do the same. When we have our students here, they must come to understand, they must come to love Canada. And for those of them who go back, they must always remember that Canada is a home away from home.
Right.
They will trade with us, they will sell to us, they will buy from us. And that is the added advantage. Now the policy actually says that we should encourage the brains to remain here. Now I must tell you, at the convention there was some discussion about this, because it appeared as though we were having a brain drain from developing countries into Canada. But selfishly looking at this, the countries that they come from will also benefit as they have their interplay with their own country. And finally, to develop a better system to identify Canada's labour market needs and make the point system more flexible to ensure that these needs can be met. Because there's no point in having an inflexible point system, so that when your environment changes, when your situations change, the point system doesn't change with it. So we're still looking for X, and in fact the country now needs Y. So when the environment changes, the system has got to adapt, to change, to suit that environment.
So that means there's a new immigrant coming in, they will be really the one we needed at that time. Right?
That is correct. We've got to make them aware of what our needs are as they change.
Yeah.
If I can tell you this, if I were to look at what some of my classmates are doing as a profession today, if you would ask them, like we've got some of them who are computer software engineers. Now, when I was at school, I'm actually older than I look, Eric, but I finished high school in 1970. And if you were to ask my classmates in 1970, how many of you would be working as computer software engineers? Well, of course, those things never existed. So the question couldn't be asked.
Right.
But so none of them could have thought I'd be working as a computer software engineer or driving a or flying a supersonic jet. So the industries that are going to be there for tomorrow, perhaps we haven't even thought of them today.
That's
but
true.
We've got to make sure that the time when we require the workforce, that the workforce is not based on yesterday's industries, but based on today's and tomorrow's industries.
Yeah. And what do you think about the Canadians? Do you think they really want the elections?
Do they really want the elections?
In summer.
You know,
It's too much after.
I was actually asked by one of these pollsters, do I want this election now? And I thought about that for a moment, you know. And I thought, want the election now? No, I don't want the election now. But I think we need the election now. And I think that's the difference. I don't want it, but I think we need it. We need to have an election now. Because the situation with the Liberals at the moment is that, you know, it's very similar to being diagnosed with cancer.
Oh, really?
Eric, if you're diagnosed with cancer today and you've had a second opinion, you've had the accounts committee and you've had Gomery confirming it's cancer, are you going to wait for 6 months to see what else it might develop into?
Obviously not.
A cancer festers. It only gets worse. And you've got to cut it out and you've got to eliminate it. Now people are saying, I've heard this argument as well, that they don't want the election now because it's expensive. But I think this point needs to be made. The money for an election has to be paid. It's only a matter of when. It's only a matter of whether we have it in June or in December. So what we're talking about is what us chartered accountants call the time value of money.
I
So
see.
the money, let's suppose it's X. The money is going to be X today and is going to be X in December. So it has to be paid. We have to face that.
Right.
It's just a matter of whether we pay it now or we pay it in
later.
And the cost then is not the money itself. It's the time value of the money, because we're paying it now rather than in December. And that's quite different to what's in people's minds today as they talk about not wanting to spend that money. That money has to be spent because that's a democracy.
Right.
But the question is whether it's spent now or whether it's spent in December. And I think it has to be spent when the people are ready. What we're doing right now is we're going to our constituencies and we're testing the ground. We're saying, do you think we need an election?
Yeah.
Now, the Liberals will have us believe that we can't call an election now until the inquiry has reported.
That's what Liberals say so.
Well, you know, this is
they want the power, right?
It's a bit two-faced. It's a bit hypocritical.
Yeah.
Because what they did last year, a year ago, was to say, let's call the election. We don't need to wait for the end of the accounts committee report. And as soon as they called the election, they closed down the committee. So why is it then they wanted a sharp election? And now we have to wait, when we know a lot more. In fact, what we know now is why they called that election. Because I think the Liberals knew what was under the rocks. They knew the worms that were under there. They knew what was going to be revealed, and they didn't want it revealed. And again, it was power at all costs. So they called the election hoping for the best. And had they got a majority, we would not today have seen the Gomery inquiry revealing the scandalous sleaze that we now see coming out of that inquiry.
You think that the inquiry had really dirty things?
I think there's more to come. I think this is just the tip of the
really
iceberg.
More?
I think it's
we
the tip of the
saw
iceberg.
a lot already. You see still more?
I think it's the tip of the iceberg, and I think it's not just the Liberal problem in Quebec. I think it's a culture that the Liberals have developed over the years in office, and it's
because
a culture that they developed. Well, you know, one great man once said that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely, and this government has become corrupt.
12 years already.
They started corrupt, though. I must tell you that they started with a vision of corruption. And to bring all of this in, and they've worked, and they perfected it. They've got it down to a fine art.
What happens if all these Canadians still think they are the right party, that are going to vote for them?
Well, Eric, I always believe that people get the government they deserve, and I can't believe for a moment that the Canadian people will allow that to happen. I have more faith in the Canadian people. I think they'll say enough is enough.
Okay, thank you, Joris, and let's end of our program, and see you next time.